Nobody ever talks to us." Her tiny hands signed the confession slowly, as if even hope had gone quiet. In a room bursting with balloons, laughter, and children chasing bright colors, two little girls in matching red dresses pressed themselves against the wall, invisible in plain sight. Parents snapped photos, executives clinked champagne glasses, and the CEO hosting the celebration never once looked toward her own deaf daughters, the ones watching the party like ghosts at their own funeral. No one saw them, and the few who didn't care, except a single dad, an exhausted janitor pushing a cleaning cart. Jonah Raines. He knew what it felt like to be ignored until you disappeared. And he had every reason to keep his head down, avoid the memories sign language always dragged back to the surface. But something in their eyes, that quiet surrender, pulled him across the room. One word, one gesture. "Hello." That tiny sign would shatter 5 damaged lives wide open and let the light in. "Before we begin, tell us where in the world are you watching from? We love seeing how far our stories travel." Jonah's body screamed exhaustion as he emptied another trash bin near the activity stations. 3 hours of sleep, construction work from 7 that morning until 2 in the afternoon. Now this emergency shift covering the annual Lawton Dynamics fundraiser because Jerry had called in sick and Jonah needed every dollar he could scrape together. His janitor uniform felt heavy. His hands ached. At 35, he felt 70. The atrium had been transformed into a carnival for kids. Face painting, balloon animals, games, a small petting zoo in the corner. Dozens of children ran wild, their laughter echoing off the glass ceiling. Lawton Dynamics executives worked the crowd, shaking hands with donors, posing for photos with families. The whole scene radiated success and joy. Jonah kept his head down, invisible. That's how he preferred it. Then he saw them. 2 small girls sitting on the floor against the far wall, knees pulled to their chests, watching everything with expressions that made Jonah's chest tighten. Identical twins, maybe 6 years old, their brown skin glowing under the party lights, with thick natural hair pulled into 2 puffs each, wearing red dresses. They sat perfectly still while chaos swirled around them, children running past without a glance, adults stepping around them like furniture. Jonah watched a group of kids race by, laughing. The twins' eyes followed them, hopeful for just a moment. Then the kids disappeared toward the face-painting booth without acknowledging the girls existed. The twins' faces fell back into that terrible resignation. Jonah's feet moved before his brain caught up. Cart abandoned. As he got closer, he noticed the small devices in their ears. Hearing aids. Understanding crashed over him. They were deaf. Every instinct told him to turn around, walk away, don't get involved. Sign language meant remembering Mira, her hands flying through conversations, her silent laugh, the way she'd sign, "I love you," before bed every night. It meant remembering who he used to be before grief buried that man alive. He stopped walking, his hands clenched into fists. But one of the twins looked directly at him, her deep brown eyes meeting his. And Jonah saw something that destroyed every defense he'd built. Not just loneliness, acceptance of loneliness. These children had already learned they didn't matter. What would Mira do? The thought hit like a physical blow. His wife would sit with them, make them laugh, remind them they were worth seeing. Jonah took a shaking breath. When had he become someone who walked away from kids who needed exactly what he could give? He sat down on the floor beside them, ignoring his aching back and the stares from executives who probably wondered why the janitor was sitting with guests. Both girls startled, eyes wide with surprise that an adult had actually approached. Jonah's hands felt rusty as they formed signs he hadn't used in 3 years, but muscle memory took over. "Hello? My name's Jonah. What are your names?" The twins' mouths dropped open. They looked at each other, confirming they were really seeing this, an adult speaking their language. Slowly, the girl on the left signed back, her small hands tentative. "I'm Isla. This is Lark, Those are beautiful names. Why are you sitting here all alone? Lark's hands moved with heartbreaking matter-of-factness. Nobody talks to us. They never do. The words, or signs, hit Jonah like a sledgehammer. These children, at 6 years old, had accepted invisibility as their permanent condition. Well, I'm talking to you, Jonah signed, feeling something crack open in his chest, something he'd kept locked tight for 3 years. And I have an important question. Do you know why elephants never forget? Both twins shook their heads, confused, but curious, because nobody ever tells them anything worth forgetting. It was a terrible joke, the kind Jonah used to tell his ASL students to break the ice, back when he was a teacher, back when he was someone else entirely. But Lark's serious face cracked into the smallest smile. Isla's eyes lit up like someone had flipped a switch. That's silly, Isla signed, but she was grinning. You think that's silly? Wait until you see my dad dance. Before they could respond, Jonah launched into the most embarrassing dad moves he could manage while sitting. Exaggerated shoulder shimmies, ridiculous hand waves, a seated version of the Running Man. The twins stared for a shocked moment, then their faces transformed. Giggles, then full silent laughter, their small bodies shaking with joy. Jonah kept going. He told them about the time he tried to teach a dog sign language, and the dog just licked his hands. He pretended to be a confused penguin trying to fly. He made funny faces that had Lark holding her stomach. For the first time in 3 years, Jonah's hands didn't feel heavy. They felt right. The commotion drew every gaze. Parents paused mid-photo. Children froze with paintbrushes in hand. At the edge of the celebration, a single exhausted janitor, Jonah Raines, single dad, had 2 little girls in matching red dresses bent over in laughter. Their laughter rang out clear, loud, echoing down the hall, above the balloons and chatter, even though they couldn't hear the sound themselves. Their puffs bounced, their shoulders shook, their joy flew like bright sparks in the air. All eyes turned. Event staff whispered to each other, pointing. Across the atrium, Dr. Aria Laughton stood frozen mid-sentence, her pitch to a potential investor dying on her lips. She'd been so focused on closing this deal, on maintaining the company her late husband had built, on keeping everything under control, because control was the only thing preventing her from falling apart completely. But now her daughters, her precious Isla and Lark, were laughing, really laughing, the way they hadn't, since before the accident 18 months ago that had killed their father and taken away their hearing, leaving their voices quiet ever since. Aria watched this janitor sign fluently, his dark hands moving with practiced ease, his expressions animated and warm. She watched her daughters light up like stars, their hands flying in conversation, their faces radiating pure joy. He was doing what she should be doing. What she'd failed to do despite all the tutors and classes and expensive therapists. Shame burned through her chest like acid. The investor said something. Aria didn't hear it. She excused herself and walked toward her daughters, her heels clicking on the polished floor with each step. Jonah noticed her approaching, a tall black woman in a designer suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent, her dark brown skin flawless, her natural hair styled in an elegant twist, her face carefully composed. When she reached them, Isla and Lark's laughter faded. They sat up straighter, their joy dimming. That told Jonah everything he needed to know about their relationship. "You speak sign language?" Aria said. Not a question. "Yes, ma'am, I was just keeping them company." "They're my daughters." Aria's voice was tight. "I haven't seen them laugh like that I can't remember how long." The guilt in her eyes was unmistakable. Jonah recognized it. He saw the same thing in his bathroom mirror at 3 in the morning when he wondered if he was failing Theo. "They're wonderful kids," Jonah said quietly. "Smart, funny. They just needed someone to talk to them. I should be able to do that." The words came out raw. Jonah started to respond, but Aria shook her head. I need to talk to you after the event. Please. The fundraiser ended at 7. Jonah was collecting his supplies when Aria appeared in the doorway of the storage closet. She'd lost the confident CEO mask. Now she just looked tired. Can we talk? 5 minutes? They ended up in a quiet corner of the employee break room. Aria sat across from Jonah, her fingers twisting together, a nervous gesture that made her seem human instead of untouchable. My name is Dr. Aria Laughton. I own this company. Those girls, Isla and Lark, are my daughters. Jonah nodded, waiting. 18 months ago, my husband was driving them home from a birthday party. A tire blew out on the highway. Her voice trembled. Caleb didn't survive. The girls were in the back seat. The impact damaged their hearing almost completely. She swallowed hard. They can still use their voices, but after the accident, they barely try. Words hurt. Speaking reminds them of what they lost. So now they mostly sign and laugh when they feel safe enough to let joy slip out. I'm sorry, Jonah said, meaning it. He knew that weight, the way loss compressed your chest until breathing felt like a luxury you didn't deserve. My wife died 3 years ago. Heart failure. She was 36 years old and her heart just stopped. Middle of a Tuesday afternoon while she was making lunch. The memory still had claws. Coming home to find paramedics in his kitchen, Mira on the floor, Theo screaming in the neighbor's arms. She was deaf from birth. We communicated entirely in sign language. I was an ASL teacher at the community center. That's how we met. She came to a workshop I was leading. We built our whole life around that language. Was? Aria asked softly. I quit 3 months after she died. Couldn't do it anymore. Every sign reminded me of her hands. Every gesture felt like reopening a wound that wouldn't heal. He gestured to his janitor uniform. Took these jobs instead. Construction during the day, janitorial at night. Been running for 3 years. But you stopped running today. Jonah thought about Isla and Lark's laughter, about how his hands had felt right for the first time since Mira died. Yeah, I guess I did. Aria leaned forward. I want to hire you to teach me sign language properly, to teach me how to communicate with my daughters the way you did today. I'll pay you whatever you want. Jonah started to refuse automatically, but he paused, really thinking about it. Today, when he'd sat with those little girls, he hadn't felt the crushing grief he'd expected. Instead, he'd felt connected to something good, to Mira's memory without the pain drowning everything else, to the passion he'd once had for teaching, to the man he used to be. Maybe running wasn't helping. Maybe honoring Mira meant doing what she'd loved most, helping people communicate, building bridges, making deaf children feel seen. Maybe it was time to stop punishing himself for surviving. I don't want your money, but I'll teach you, every evening before my night shift, 8 to 10, 2 hours. Relief flooded Aria's face. Thank you so much. One condition. You bring Isla and Lark to the lessons. This isn't just about you learning signs. It's about rebuilding the connection between the three of you. Tears spilled down Aria's cheeks. Okay, yes, we'll be there. That night, Jonah went home to their small apartment and found Theo sleeping on the couch, a book open on his chest. His neighbor, Ms. Delaney, had let herself in to watch him like she did every day. Bless her. Jonah gently shook Theo awake. Theo blinked up at him, his brown eyes sleepy, his locks falling across his forehead. Dad? You okay? Jonah's hands moved slowly, hesitantly, forming signs he hadn't used with his son in 3 years. I met 2 little girls today. They reminded me that your mom would want me to stop being afraid. I'm going to start teaching sign language again. Theo's eyes went wide. Then, tears streaming down his face, he signed back. Mom would be happy. Jonah pulled his son into a hug, both of them crying, finally allowing themselves to remember not just the pain of loss, but the beauty of what they'd had. The lessons started the following week. Aria arrived at Laughton Dynamics at 8 sharp with Isla and Lark, who practically bounced when they saw Jonah waiting in the conference room. The first session was awkward. Aria struggled with hand positions, mixing up similar signs, forgetting movements she'd practiced at home. Her daughters watched with patient surprise, clearly shocked their mother was really trying. But she kept showing up, every single evening. Sometimes straight from important meetings, still in her power suits, other times in casual clothes, having left work early to pick up the girls herself instead of sending the nanny. Jonah watched her transform. The rigid CEO mask cracked further with each lesson. She laughed at her own mistakes. She lit up when she successfully signed a complete sentence. Most importantly, she started really seeing her daughters. Not as problems to solve, but as the funny, smart, loving children they were. Isla taught her the sign for butterfly because Aria mentioned missing the butterflies in their old garden. Lark signed jokes Jonah had taught her, making her mother laugh until tears ran down her face. During their third week, while practicing, Isla's small hands moved deliberately. "Mommy, you're getting better." Aria's face crumpled. "I'm so sorry it took me this long." "It's okay," Lark signed. "You're here now." 4 weeks into the lessons, Jonah's neighbor, Ms. Delaney, called with bad news. She'd fallen and sprained her ankle, needed to rest for a few days. Jonah's stomach dropped. He couldn't afford to miss work. Theo couldn't stay home alone. "Bring him with you," Aria said when he explained before that evening's lesson. "The girls have been asking about him anyway." Jonah hesitated. He'd mentioned Theo during lessons. The twins were always curious, signing questions about what he looked like, how old he was, if he knew sign language too. But bringing him felt like mixing his broken personal life with this fragile new thing. "Jonah," Aria said gently, "it's okay. Really. Bring him." So that evening, Jonah arrived with Theo in tow. His son clutched his backpack straps nervously, eyes huge as they walked through the gleaming lobby with its marble floors and expensive artwork. "Dad, this place is really fancy," Theo whispered. "Wait until you see the conference room," Jonah said, trying to sound confident, even though his heart was hammering. What if the kids didn't get along? What if this was a mistake? When they entered, Isla and Lark were already there practicing finger spelling. Both twins looked up and their eyes went huge when they saw the boy with dark brown skin and neatly twisted locks standing beside Jonah. "This is my son, Theo," Jonah signed, gently pushing his son forward. "Theo, these are the girls I told you about, Isla and Lark." Theo stood frozen and Jonah's chest tightened. His son hadn't really interacted with other kids much since Mira died. He'd become quiet, withdrawn, spending most of his time alone reading or drawing. What if... Then Theo's hands moved slowly, carefully, forming signs Jonah hadn't seen him use in years. "Hello, my name is Theo. Nice to meet you." Isla and Lark's faces exploded with surprise and delight. "You know sign language?" Lark signed excitedly. "My mom taught me," Theo signed back, and Jonah saw his son's eyes glisten. "She was deaf like you." A moment of heavy silence, understanding that only children who'd lost parents could share. Then Isla stood up and walked over to Theo, looking at him with serious eyes. "Our dad died too, in a car accident. My mom's heart stopped working. I miss her every day." Jonah glanced at Aria and saw tears streaming down her face. Both parents watching their children connect over shared grief in a way that was both heartbreaking and beautiful. Then Lark joined them, and suddenly she was signing something that made Theo's face light up. "Do you want to see us do handstands? We've been practicing." Theo's face lit up. "I can do handstands too." Just like that, the heaviness lifted. The 3 children moved to the open space and suddenly they were attempting handstands, giggling, Isla and Lark silently, Theo out loud, competing to see who could hold the position longest. Jonah and Aria abandoned the lesson plan completely and just watched, amazed. "I can also do cartwheels," Theo signed, when they all collapsed on the floor, breathless. "Show us," Isla signed eagerly. Theo demonstrated a wobbly cartwheel that wasn't quite straight, but earned enthusiastic applause. Then Lark wanted to try, and Isla insisted she could do it better. And suddenly, they were all taking turns, laughing at failures, celebrating successes. "I haven't seen him like this in 3 years," Jonah said quietly to Aria. "He's been so sad, so withdrawn. I thought maybe that was just who he was now." "They haven't had any friends since the accident," Aria replied, voice thick with emotion. "Other kids at school don't know how to talk to them. They eat lunch alone, play alone. I thought maybe that was just how it would be." They watched Theo teach Isla and Lark a clapping game, the 3 children's hands moving in complicated patterns, stumbling, laughing, trying again. "Your dad is funny," Isla signed to Theo. "He told us a joke about elephants. My dad tells terrible jokes," Theo signed back, grinning. "Want to hear the worst one?" Both twins nodded eagerly. "Why did the bicycle fall over?" A pause. "Because it was too tired." Isla and Lark groaned and laughed simultaneously, and Theo looked so proud Jonah's heart could have burst. Then Lark got serious. "Do you talk to your mom? Like still, even though she's gone?" Theo's smile faded, but he nodded. "Sometimes at night I tell her about my day. Dad says it's okay, that she can still hear me somehow." "We talk to our dad too," Isla signed. "Mom says he's watching over us. Maybe they're together up there," Theo signed. "Maybe they're friends now." The simplicity and hopefulness of it, that their lost parents might be friends somewhere, made both Jonah and Aria turn away to wipe their eyes. As the evening wound down, the 3 children were inseparable. They exchanged favorite colors: Theo, blue; Isla, purple; Lark, yellow. Favorite foods: unanimous agreement that pizza was supreme. Favorite animals: a lengthy debate between dolphins, tigers, and penguins. "Can Theo come back next time?" Isla asked her mother, her small face hopeful. Aria looked at Jonah, who nodded. "I think that can be arranged." When it was time to leave, all 3 children hugged goodbye, Lark holding on to Theo extra long, making him blush. As Jonah and Theo walked to the parking lot, his son slipped his hand into Jonah's, something he hadn't done since he was 5. "Dad," Theo said quietly, "those girls are really nice. Can we see them again? Not just at lessons?" Jonah looked down at his son, at the hope blooming in his eyes, at the faint smile still on his lips. "Yeah, buddy, we definitely can." That night, after Theo fell asleep, Jonah sat in the dark living room and cried, but not tears of grief this time. Tears of relief, of gratitude, of something that felt dangerously close to hope. His son had laughed today, had made friends, had remembered his mother without drowning in sadness. Maybe they were both finally learning to live again. After that evening, everything changed. Theo came to every lesson, and the lessons evolved into something more: family time. Aria started bringing dinner, and they'd all eat together in the conference room, the children chattering in sign language while the adults looked on with full hearts. Jonah started turning down construction shifts. The money was tighter, but Theo needed him present more than he needed extra cash. And when Aria found out, she didn't just offer him money, she created a real job. ASL coordinator for Lawton Dynamics' new accessibility program, she said when Jonah tried to refuse. "It's a real job. Salary, benefits, health insurance, regular hours. You develop training programs, work with our HR department, help us become a truly inclusive workplace." "Aria, I can't." "Yes, you can, and you should. Because you're good at this, Jonah. You're good at building bridges, and you deserve stability. Theo deserves a father who isn't exhausted all the time." So Jonah accepted. For the first time in 3 years, he could breathe, could be present for his son, could sleep more than 3 hours a night. The romance between him and Aria grew gradually, like spring after a brutal winter. Quiet conversations after the children fell asleep during movie nights at Aria's house. Coffee meetings that stopped being about sign language and started being about everything else. Stolen glances across conference tables, hands brushing when they both reached for the same teaching material. Neither of them rushed it. They'd both been married before. Both carried ghosts that deserved respect. But slowly, carefully, they built something new. 5 months after that first fundraiser, they were all at Aria's house on a Saturday night. The children were in the living room, Theo teaching Isla and Lark a complicated card game while they taught him a board game they loved. Aria was in the kitchen, and Jonah found himself standing in the doorway watching his son laugh with the twins. For the first time in 3 years, he felt whole. Not healed. Grief didn't work that way. Mira's absence would always be a tender place in his heart. But he'd stopped running from it. He'd learned to carry it alongside the new joy filling his life. Aria appeared beside him, slipping her hand into his. "Happy?" She signed with her free hand. "Yes," Jonah signed back. Finally. That night, after all 3 kids fell asleep in sleeping bags in the living room, after an impromptu camping-themed movie night, Aria and Jonah sat on the back porch under the stars. "I never thought I'd feel this again," Aria whispered. "Complete." "Me neither. But maybe that's what second chances look like. Not replacing what we lost, but building something new alongside those memories." Aria leaned her head on his shoulder. "Caleb would have liked you. Mira would have loved you. Probably would have hit me if she knew I'd been running from sign language for 3 years. Aria laughed softly. "She sounds like she was amazing." "She was, and so was Caleb, from everything you've told me. I think they'd be happy we found each other." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to crickets and distant traffic. 2 broken people who'd somehow managed to fit their jagged pieces together in a way that worked. 18 months after that fundraiser, Jonah stood in Aria's backyard wearing a suit that actually fit for once, his heart pounding as guests took their seats in neat rows. Theo stood beside him in a matching suit, fidgeting with his tie. "You nervous, Dad?" Theo signed. Terrified, Jonah signed back honestly. Good terrified, though. "Yeah, good terrified." Isla and Lark appeared in matching pink dresses, carrying small bouquets, their faces glowing with excitement. They took their places on the other side, and then music started, soft and sweet. Aria appeared at the end of the aisle in a simple white dress, carrying wildflowers, her natural hair flowing in loose curls around her shoulders, her face radiant with a happiness that had taken 2 years to build, but was worth every moment. The ceremony was short and sweet. The officiant spoke, but Jonah barely heard the words. He was too busy looking at Aria, at their 3 children standing as witnesses, at this impossible family they'd built from broken pieces. When it came time for vows, Aria's hands moved through sign language as she spoke aloud, her voice steady and clear. "Jonah, you taught me that showing up is an act of courage, that learning someone's language, really learning it, is an act of love. You gave me back my daughters, and you gave them the friend they needed in Theo. You gave us all permission to grieve what we lost while still choosing to build something beautiful." Jonah's hands shook as he signed his vows. "Aria, you taught me that running from pain doesn't make it hurt less. It just makes you miss the good stuff too. You and your daughters reminded me that my hands were made for building bridges, not pushing people away. You gave Theo his smile back. You gave us all a reason to stop just surviving and start living again." The officiant pronounced them married, and as they kissed, 3 children stood to the side, signing "I love you" in perfect unison, Theo, Isla, and Lark, siblings in all the ways that mattered. At the reception, as the sun set and string lights twinkled overhead, Jonah watched the three kids run around the yard playing tag and laughing. Aria stood beside him, her hand in his, both of them marveling at the impossible beauty of this moment. 2 years ago, I was invisible, Jonah said softly. Just a janitor pushing a cart, trying not to remember who I used to be. 2 years ago, I was drowning. So focused on control that I couldn't see my daughters were drowning too. And now? Aria smiled. Now we're exactly where we're supposed to be. Jonah thought about that fundraiser, about 2 little girls sitting invisible against a wall, about the choice he'd made to walk over instead of walk away, about how one hello in sign language had cracked open 5 broken lives and let the light pour in. They'd all been shattered. They'd all been lost. But somehow, in finding each other, they discovered that broken pieces could fit together in ways that were even more beautiful than before. Not because they'd forgotten what they'd lost, but because they'd chosen to honor those losses by living fully, loving bravely, and remembering that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop being invisible, for yourself and for others who need someone to finally see them. As the evening faded into night, Jonah pulled all 3 children into a group hug. Aria's arms wrapped around them all, and he felt Mira's presence like a whisper in the wind. Not sad, not gone, just quietly proud. You did good, he could almost hear her sign. You all did so good. And for the first time since that terrible Tuesday 4 years ago, when her heart stopped beating, Jonah allowed himself to believe it was true. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, if it reminded you that second chances exist, that broken doesn't mean beyond repair, that sometimes all someone needs is to be seen, please don't let it end here. Let it remind you, kindness still matters, compassion still changes lives, and hope is never wasted. Subscribe and be part of our TribeAfriTales family, where every story lifts the spirit and reminds us that light always finds its way back. And if this moment moved you, share it, because sometimes sharing hope is the kindest thing we can do.